conversation on Tim Pool. It's going to be a short one. It's going to end with Tim and Ben Shapiro having a conversation. Tim Pool is a weird guy. We already know this. Blah blah blah. This you can see all his thumbnails look the same. Blah blah this. Blah 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 blah. I want you to just pay attention to one thing. We're not watching any of these videos. Just pay attention to something. Chauvin trial lawyer lands slam dunk again using state's own witness, but Floyd prosecutors did well. The Floyd prosecutors, not the prosecutors for that are charging Derek Chauvin. The people defending Floyd did well. Gotta have this in the back of your head. Biden wrongly denounces constitutional rights in order to enforce Democrat gun control agenda. Constitutional rights. Massive backfire against prosecutor may have just gotten Derek Chauvin acquitted in Floyd trial. Now you might say, well, it's just his titles. Like, what does that have to do with anything? The codes. What is he sticking up for? Does he think Derek Chauvin didn't kill George Floyd? Why are you making videos saying, oh, look, the defense did great? Like, see what I mean? It's easy to find it. I don't know. George Floyd girlfriend says state witness is their dealer. Witness then refuses to testify. Leftists accused of trying to corrupt Chauvin trial. You go down. eBay just nuked Dr. Seuss books as offensive. RSBN gets nuked by YouTube as censorship escalates. Texas GOP endorses vote to secede. Republican calls to secede as Democrats and media crying sedition. That's sedition. Did we not have a war over this? Was Texas not one of the states that started that war? Oh my God. So it's like the people who watch this have a thought in their head, right? Clearly a thought in their head. Woke journalists demanding boycott over Tucker George Floyd comment. He's just so disingenuous. He claims to be a centrist, but he's a fucking Republican shill. Which leads us to this.
First about sort of how you came to do what you're doing right now, and then we'll talk about how your political views were formed over time, because they do seem to move and evolve over time in a way that's really unique in the space. So first, I think that, to talk about, kind of how you came to prominence in this space in the first place, my first experience seeing some of your stuff was during the Occupy Wall Street protests, when you were the only person who was out there actually taking footage and covering that stuff. But how did you get started in this area?
Well, it started with Occupy Wall Street. So
they sound the same. What the fuck? They sound exactly the same. Rapid, coked up talking. Okay, I'm not going to shit on them. Let's just watch it. Let's just relax.
I had been doing nonprofit work. I've been hanging out with hackers, and this was back in like the days of Anonymous and some other hacker groups. And so the big core ideology behind what we did and why we did it, and it was mostly other people, I wasn't super active, was making sure people had access to information, be it get them the internet or give them the key details as to what's going on. And then all of a sudden you had these journalists say, well, that's journalism. You're sharing information. You're disseminating that stuff. So for me, I ended up on the East Coast. And then when I saw Occupy Wall Street happened, I was just I had just left California. I'm just some guy who's skateboarding and making videos. And I decided to go and start filming, eventually start live streaming. And while I'm streaming, I'm giving my thoughts on what's happening and essentially doing this raw live commentary. I had this big moment where I did a live stream for 22 hours straight. People were like running up to find me to give me batteries to keep it going. And then I started just covering conflict and crisis. From there, I went from some guy who's live streaming these protests to actually working for Vice. And I was the founding member of Vice News, the actual vertical, where I went on the ground to various countries, like Venezuela, like Turkey, Brazil, went to Egypt, watched the revolution happen. And I was just covering the conflict and crisis stuff there. Eventually, the conflict and crisis came to the U.S. So I ended up working for a company called Fusion. They started out trying to be like Vice, and this is essentially put me in, that was a crazy moment for me because all of a sudden I had my colleagues from Vice who used to help me go to these countries messaging me saying, don't go to Sweden to cover the story. And I was confused. Why wouldn't I? Like, I went to Egypt, I went to Ukraine, I went to a bunch of countries. No, but don't do this one. Trump's lying. And I'm like, I don't know anything about this. I don't know anything about Trump or what he's talking about. I just heard there are some claims about, refugees and crime. I'm going to go and investigate it. And they got really, really mad at me. And that was when I could see like this weird split starting to emerge. So from there, I come back to the U.S. and I started covering the conflicts we see on the ground in the U.S., Proud Boys, Antifa, that kind of stuff. And of course, what do I see? 99% of the time, you get some Trump supporters waving little American flags and Antifa shows up and attacks them. I would report it. Antifa would get really mad at me. So they started threatening me, doxing me. Someone posted a photo of my mom at one point. And so that was like, for me, I think I already had some, personal biases going back to my upbringing in Chicago. But now it's all I'm trying to do is cover what's happening on the ground. And by telling the truth, these extremists and like Antifa type people were attacking me and threatening me.
Victimhood. Because we've covered Tim Pool on here, and we've seen how he's literally on Twitter and on his show lied about multiple instances where his own video doesn't even show it. But he'll draw these conclusions. These Antifa people get mad at me when I post the truth. The truth is not your take on it. The truth would just be you recording what's happening. See where I'm getting at? Where he'll slip and say the thing, but like he'll hide behind the fact that he didn't actually say the thing. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt, because, I like giving people the benefit of the doubt.
And that, was kind of, I guess, to be expected. But it did set me off on a path where, for one, I couldn't actually go on the ground anymore. So I slowly stopped doing it because it was getting more and more dangerous. So then I started doing more and more news commentary and analysis to kind of make up for the fact that I couldn't be on the ground, aggregate more of the people who actually are doing the work. And I kind of feel like it's not a completely uncommon track for journalists to go from field reporter and then eventually later in their career, they find themselves as like a news commentary kind of person. And then once it just became completely obvious that, it happened when I went to Portland. I had some guy chasing me around, yelling, like while I'm trying to film. And I'm like, okay, clearly I got, too many people know who I am. They're seeking me out. They're causing trouble. They're trolling, or they're actually attacking me. So I'm going to...
Like the media that got attacked for reporting by the police. You see what I'm talking about? Like, these are where I'm saying you're not saying the thing. You're not proving the point. You're saying... my personal biases led me to this, even though that same thing happens to other people, which is what we just talked about with voter ID laws.
I'm going to have to stop coming to a lot of these events and then just report to the best of my abilities from the desk. I just started increasing the amount of work I started doing. I started doing multiple segments per day. Now I think I do an hour and 45 minutes of direct commentary, and I do a total of I do an additional 2 hours of a live podcast show, which brings me to this position where now I'm kind of this, I think, as you mentioned, like a heterodox individual, don't really fit necessarily anywhere. Although I think I've been classified as like cultural right wing, whatever that means. But my political positions are kind of just like where Democrats used to be. It's a weird position to be in. I will say, I think the easiest way to explain that I'm not orthodox, I suppose, in some capacity, like I'm a heterodox personality, is whenever they try and smear people who are, like right now, you got a lot of people on podcasts and YouTube, for instance, that are saying the election's not over. You get these articles saying, or CNN, for instance, you've got the right-wing media lying, claim the election's not over, but they never mention me. Because if they do, they show you like, my segments are actually fairly, I don't want to say bland, but the joke is that I'm a milquetoast fence sitter. I will tell you, we have a sworn affidavit from numerous, poll watchers, but I'm not going to come out and scream the election was stolen and Trump won. I'm just going to say we should investigate this. It doesn't really work very well.
I was right. I'm going to allude to the thing, but I never actually said the thing. We have sworn affidavits from poll workers that show there was some discrepancies that we should investigate. The people who listen to you hear that and say, the election's not over, Trump won. But because you didn't go that far, it doesn't matter how people take it. Even though no matter what you're saying, you're still leading them to the river. You're tricky when you try to catch people off like that.
For the mainstream media to smear me as some kind of conspiracy theorist when I don't make an assertion beyond here's a fact. So ultimately, I find myself in this weird position where, for one, if you go to like my flagship channel with the most subscribers, it's like basically the media is trash and the Democrats are too. So then people see that and they say Tim Pool must be right wing. But then when it comes to actual policy, like my politics are probably, independent center left, and I disagree with conservatives on a lot of core issues that result in Trump supporters getting mad at me. It's a weird position. I don't know. But ultimately, that's where I'm at now. And then I guess at some point, Ben Shapiro hit me up and asked me to come on his show. So, yeah.
So I want to talk with you about, you obviously were covering Antifa. You've covered in detail Black Lives Matter, and you mentioned sort of the woke phenomenon. I want to talk about the phenomenon, and then I want to talk about what I think is actually a more important issue, which is the meta phenomenon of how social media and the media refuse to cover this phenomenon. How they have decided that certain narratives are worth cultivating, and certain narratives must be barred, certain narratives must be suppressed. Because
all right, that's where I'm stopping with this one, because you can see where it's headed, and it's like, maybe this isn't where. No, matter of fact, let's keep going.
To me, that is the scarier. The scarier phenomenon is sort of the mainstream deciding what we can and cannot see. There's the radicals, and they're scary, but they're kind of a small proportion of the population. Then you actually have like this mainstream phenomenon of attempting to quash any discussion of the radicalism, which effectively makes them enablers. So let's talk about Antifa. So you covered Antifa on the ground. We've been told by the media that Antifa are alternatively World War II era Allied troops storming the beaches of Normandy. We've been told by...
No, you have not been told by that. It's that everybody makes the distinction or the correlation between the Antifa movement of now and the rise of far-right white nationalist agendas. And if they're going to act like fascists, then there's going to be a counterforce, which would be Antifa. Too easy.
Joe Biden, that they are not, in fact, a group, that they are, in fact, just sort of a philosophy, sort of like Cubism or something, like an artistic movement. What exactly is Antifa, since you've covered them on the ground?
It's it's not necessarily wrong to say that they're a movement or an idea, but it's the individual cells that we're talking about, I think what you're talking about. And what they do is the mainstream media uses a semantic argument to try and act like they don't exist. So to put it simply, Antifa is the symbols they use, the ideology. Typically, you'll find that many of these people are authoritarian communists. And
authoritarian communists. Please give us health care. That's authoritarian communists. I thought we were Marxist socialists. Yo, this video just came out a few days ago when literally a few months ago, they boarded planes. They were wearing all black. Like, Antifa is not a fucking organization. Matter of fact, stop even saying, I'm not even going to go on the idea of Antifa as a the reason why they all call themselves Antifa is because y'all are acting like fascists. Like, you're enabling fascism. You want it so bad. Like, you want it so bad. Like, to even have the nerve to say somebody from Portland who is probably pouring on food stamps is an authoritarian, communist, ideal lover. Like, what? But I'm going to let him explain himself because that's fair.
I'm not trying to exaggerate or do some stupid, they're all communists. No, like they're literally, they believe in authoritarian communism. But it's rooted in, World War pre.
If Antifa was authoritarian communists and they wanted power, why do they only show up when you guys show up?
World War II Germany, Weimar Germany, where you had the Communist Party had their anti-fasciste action, and it was challenging the fascists. They use the same symbols. They create small individual groups with, they say no leaders. They have leaders, they do. And then they coordinate for various actions. They call them nationwide. So ultimately what you have are political zealots who believe in the use of violence for political gain and terror for political gain. What they'll do is they'll tell you, and they'll have allies in media tell you, there's no such thing as Antifa. It's not a group. Well, that's a semantic manipulation. They're playing a game here. If I say Antifa came out in Portland and attacked people, I'm talking about Rose City Antifa. It's a legitimate group. They have membership. They have membership drives. They put out, flyers or they put out a website saying, "Here's how you join our group." They have their own merchandise that says Rose City Antifa on it. So it would be like, the media is trying to use wordplay to trick you into believing that these various groups don't exist. Because if I said, I went to Portland and Antifa came out, then I went to Boston and Antifa came out, they say, aha, see, that proves it, because there's no connection between those two groups. But it's the general idea is they hold that same ideology, wearing all black. They use similar tactics. They use the same symbols, and they typically agree with each other on their cause and their means to the end. So you actually have a loose-knit group of various cells that coordinate with each other, using violence against their political opponents.
He's not wrong about the groups, but he's wrong about the violence for political gain, because these groups literally do not care about who's president.
For the most part, instigating it outright to win. And it works for them.
To win what?
The example I often give to people,
Okay, go.
why is it that social media is so willing to censor right-wing individuals, but Antifa is literally organizing violent riots online, even probably right now. They've been doing it, all year and for the past several years. And it's simple. Antifa in, say, San Francisco, in the Bay Area, they'll show up to the headquarters of these big tech companies and they'll trash the place. So these companies say, well, leave them alone. But there's not going to be a conservative group marching to Twitter HQ with pitchforks and torches. So long as big companies keep giving Antifa what they want or showing them their tactics work, they'll keep doing what they do. And as for the loose-knit nature of what they do, it's all on purpose. The reason why they don't have an official nationwide organization is it's actually really easy to understand when you look at the Proud Boys. Obviously, the Proud Boys and Antifa are not the same things, but there are similarities in that you have these groups that fight on the ground. The Proud Boys have a chairman, Enrique Tarrio. Well, they've banned him from dozens of banks. They've banned him from all these different platforms. You give someone a leader, they use that to actually try and discredit the rest of your group.
Is he about to make the Martin Luther King Jr. argument and shut down Antifa with it? Oh, I can't wait.
Antifa knows this. I've actually talked to people going back to Occupy Wall Street who have straight up said, no leaders. As soon as you put someone up, they'll smear, they'll character assassinate. So it is on purpose they say they don't have leaders.
That's not true. That's not true. That's not even remotely true. And we just looked at the reason why they're decentralized and how they operate. And it took me the time it took you to say that to prove that it wasn't correct. Oh, man.
However, law enforcement knows who the individuals...
YouTube about to have so much fun with this, bro, because I could already hear the hate comments coming up. Oh, you didn't let him talk. Oh, you're just trying to find anything wrong with it. Yo, I let him speak. I don't have a... he's not wrong on how he's not wrong on the ground level information. He's wrong in his assessment of it because the assessment doesn't match up with the reality of the situation. Because again, oh my God, what political leader is backing Antifa? You could argue that political leaders don't disavow or what was it? What's the opposite of decode? We said the word earlier. God damn it. Oh, I mean, I'm running towards my empty when I can't think about words anymore. Denounce, that's the word. They're not denouncing Antifa, but that's because they're not aspiring to make Joe Biden president. They want structural change. Antifa's violent. They set up political violence. For what gain? To do what? Why is it always centered around cops? Why is it always centered around Proud Boys, Trump supporters? Are you not getting that they only seem to it would be one thing. I tell you what, I'll give Tim Pool the only credit I think I could ever give him. The only credit I could ever give Tim Pool at this entire point is not only is he correct about his assertion of how he got here. My problem is what he's leading these statements into. Because we just looked up, and it's still up there. If you're on YouTube, oh no, you can't see them. Fuck. Anyway, the links are still up there. I'll probably put them in the description. Ain't no way you can literally tie every Antifa appearance to a response to something else. Now, if we get into who instigates violence, who does this, blah, blah, whatever, fine. That's a muddied water, and he's probably right in that situation. I don't even want to give him that credit, but he's probably right in that situation. What is their political goal? Cultural Marxism? Some other right-wing thing? They're going to take over America and make us all into hippie... Like, what? How could you say so much and yet still end up at the wrong points each and every time? Because you know yourself from being on the ground what the hell caused anyone to want to associate with more of a feeling of Antifa, especially considering the fact that the oldest group that we have is 2007. That was Obama's term. So from 2007 to 2016, Democrats were in control, and there wasn't really a rise in far-right nationalist movements, as far as I know. So,
cell leaders are, I would imagine. And I think some of them got doxxed recently. So it's really, it's not, you know, their tactics aren't perfect. But I will say the left is much, much better at street level organizing than the right. And
wrong. Street level organizing, the only reason why the right doesn't have to street organize is because their leaders literally do it for them. They will pass the things that they want. That's the whole other thing. That's the whole thing.
And so you end up with a media narrative that can't understand what Antifa is or outright defends them on purpose. I think there's two things. You've got the activist media that hates Donald Trump, and they're saying, you know, oh, Antifa's no big deal, but they're saying it because they want to protect Antifa. You then have these local reporters, these people who are probably, you know, they have good intentions. They're trying to be objective and fair, but they can't grasp the concept of Antifa as a group because Antifa has specifically obfuscated what they really are. So you can't report on what they are.
I know y'all about to get real weirded out by this, but I agree with him on that. 110%. I agree with him 110%.
Then you get someone like, say, Andy No or Elijah Schaffer, someone like at one point what I was doing, and we can accurately break it down and report on the ground. They get really angry about that. And we all saw what happened to Andy No, you know, when he was out there in Portland. They physically beat him. They left him bleeding and covered in, you know, milkshake and stuff like that. Those are the people they're really worried about. But long story short, they're radical far left. They typically are authoritarian communists, but not all of them. Some of them might just be, they might be like left anarchists. I know there's a big debate over whether or not anarchists can actually be left or right, but they view themselves that way. They'll view themselves as socialists. But the big issue I see with Antifa is that you might find someone who will try and lie and justify, no, we don't believe in violence, it's self-defense. But these are the narratives they like to use to get away with what they do. And so long as you have these mainstream resistance-type Democrats who hate Trump, they won't call these groups out. And that's been something I've experienced going back to Occupy Wall Street, where the peaceful, legitimate protesters are told by these groups to respect their, quote, diversity of tactics. It's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. The idea that you're going to engage in some kind of strategy against a big system, but diversify what that strategy is makes no sense. You want to have a cohesive plan as to...
No, you don't. You want to diversify your strategy. You want to attack from multiple angles. You attack from one straight angle, and it's easier to shoot down, i.e. literally every social movement that we've had thus far, i.e. the way you're painting Antifa to be a completely negative force, even though you yourself just admitted that not everybody falls in line with the Antifa ideals. Like, you see what I mean?
To how you're going to make change happen. The reality is these groups say respect our diversity of tactics because that's code for getting violent and hurting people. And then you get these good-natured protesters who just want to, you know, wave their little signs and banners and be heard, now standing back as Antifa messes with people, knocks them down, starts fires. So I will say, I think Antifa, for the most part, is a colloquial term we use to describe the far-left extremists who use what's called the black bloc tactic, where, you know, they wear hoodies, they wear masks. I don't know what we'll call them in the future. We just called them the black bloc anarchists, you know, 10 years ago. Now they're Antifa. They're still here. They're still rioting.
We did not.
Apparently, the media calling it for Joe Biden did nothing to change their minds. And in fact, I think it's only
That's the thing. He said the thing. Joe Biden getting elected did not change their minds. So it's not political. The whole goal of it would then be like straight up, oh, we hate Trump supporters. No, we hate fascism. And I say we, like the general public should hate fascism. But oh, I see. See what I mean? It's not that he's dumb. I think Tim Pool is one of the smarter center-right types of people out there. I just think too much has happened to him, and he needs the clicks. He needs to generate.
it's only likely to escalate as if we do enter a Joe Biden administration, because certainly Joe Biden won't be strong enough to deal with these groups that are pressuring him and attacking him and getting violent. And we already saw this. I believe recently they attacked a DNC headquarters saying F Joe Biden. So anyway, there you go. I think I ranted too much on what Antifa is, but we can follow up.
So that doesn't explain how he became a disaffected liberal. That just explains that he just hates that. I guess it does. I'm not going to shit on the title. I guess it does.